The snow whispered against the window pane, soft as breath. Just beyond it, the forest held its silence, thick, frozen, watchful. Inside the cabin, the fire had long since burned low. Her body curved protectively around the bundle of fur on the wool blanket. Barely the size of a loaf of bread, the bobcat cub trembled against her ribs, its breath shallow, uneven. Clara didn't sleep. She barely breathed. Each time the wind howled against the wooden beams, she tightened her arm, shielding the cub from the cold that wanted back in. Hours passed in fragments, the kind of night where time folds. She could feel the heartbeat against her palm, too fast, too faint. Then the sound, a crunch in the snow, not distant, not casual, intentional. She lifted her head slowly. Outside the fogged window, something moved. Eyes glowed amber through the dark, low to the ground, watching. A larger shape emerged, silent as smoke, the same spotted coat, the same tufted ears. But twice the size. The mother had returned, and she was staring at the woman who had slept beside her child. Clara sat up slowly. The cub whimpered once. The mother stepped forward and did the last thing Clara ever expected. 3 days earlier, the silence had been exactly what she was looking for. Clara Bennett stepped out of her Jeep Wrangler, boots crunching the packed snow beneath her. The air in the Adirondacks bit at her cheeks, clean and sharp, but she welcomed the sting. It meant she was far enough from campus, far enough from obligations, far enough from the echoes of a hospital room she could no longer walk into. She pulled her scarf tighter, navy blue, frayed at the edges, too long for her small frame. Her brother's scarf, the only thing of his she hadn't boxed away. The cabin stood about 20 yards from the tree line, surrounded by a clearing of untouched snow and rimmed by evergreens like silent sentries. It was small, made of knotty pine logs and age-darkened shingles, but it held. Inside it smelled of cedar and old books, no television, no cell signal, only a fireplace, a kettle, and a dusty bookshelf crammed with guides to local flora and fauna. She unpacked slowly, setting her sketchbook on the table near the window. Binoculars, field notebook, cans of soup. She didn't bring much. She hadn't planned to stay long, just long enough to be quiet. Outside, the wind whistled through the trees like a voice unsure if it wanted to speak. That first night, she listened to the fire crackle and pop while she sipped herbal tea from a chipped enamel mug. She sat on the floor beside the hearth, her back pressed against the wall, sketching the outline of a spruce tree she'd seen earlier. Her pencil slowed at the base of the trunk. She added something else, a small shape, curled, almost hidden, a bobcat cub. She hadn't seen one, not yet, but something in her imagined it there. She was used to imagining things lately. By the second day, she'd started hiking short loops through the woods, always circling back before dusk. Her boots left clean imprints in the snow. She'd spot deer tracks, a fox trail. Once, a flash of feathers as a grouse startled out of brush, but no sign of larger predators, no sign of anything more dangerous than loneliness. She welcomed the ache in her legs, the chill in her fingers. It was something to feel. That evening, just after twilight began to sink into the woods, Clara stepped out to fetch more firewood. The cold hit harder than before, like it had teeth now. She tugged her scarf up over her nose, exhaling through her wool mittens. That's when she heard it. A sound so faint it might have been mistaken for the creak of snow-laden branches, but she heard it again. A high, broken cry. Her chest tightened. Animal? Wounded? She turned her head, listening hard. The sound came again, closer this time. A thin mew, then silence. Something inside her moved, The same something that used to jolt her from bed at 3 a.m. when her brother needed help breathing. The kind of instinct you don't learn, you inherit. She grabbed a flashlight from the porch and followed the sound toward the creek bed. Snow crunched beneath her boots. The beam of the flashlight wobbled as she crouched, searching the dark underbrush. A low overhang of brambles near the base of a fallen tree caught her eye. The sound was louder now, more insistent. Then she saw it, a small lump of fur half buried in the snow. Still, shivering, she moved closer, her breath caught in her throat. A bobcat cub, no bigger than a rabbit. Fur matted with frost, ears pinned back, tail twitching weakly. Its eyes were dull, unfocused, but it didn't flinch when the light hit them. It was too cold to care. Clara hesitated for a heartbeat. Maybe its mother was nearby. Maybe this was a mistake. But the cub let out another cry, so frail it sounded like air being let out of a balloon. Clara dropped to her knees. "I'm not going to hurt you," she whispered, not knowing why she said it aloud. Slowly, she unwrapped her scarf and slid it beneath the cub's limp body. The moment her hands made contact, she felt the tremble through its spine. It was still alive, but barely. She bundled it tight, pressing it close to her chest, and rose unsteadily. Snow had begun to fall again. The air felt heavier now, as if the woods had exhaled and forgotten to breathe back in. Back at the cabin, she kicked the door open with her boot and rushed inside. She laid the bundle beside the fireplace, adding fresh wood to the embers. The cub didn't move, just trembled, breath shallow, ears limp. She knelt beside it, stripped off her coat, then wrapped herself around the bundle of scarf and fur, using her own body as a barrier against the cold. "Please," she whispered, unsure if she was speaking to the cub, the fire, or something deeper. Outside, the storm gathered speed. Wind howled past the shutters like some forgotten voice trying to find its way back. And inside, in that little cabin carved out of the wild, Clara closed her eyes and began to pray, not to a god, but to the forest itself. To let this creature live. The fire hadn't gone out, but the chill still crept through the floorboards by morning. Clara stirred with a stiff neck, her cheek pressed against the edge of the woven blanket. For a moment, she forgot where she was, until she felt the faintest movement against her ribs. She lifted her head. The cub was still there, tucked into the scarf like it had always belonged there. Its breath was steadier now. Soft clouds of warmth rose with each exhale. One paw, impossibly small, had slipped out of the wrap and rested gently against her forearm. She didn't move, not right away. Sunlight was beginning to stretch across the cabin floor, pale and gold. Dust floated lazily in its path. The room felt suspended, quiet, heavy with something that wasn't quite fear or awe, but both. Then the cub stirred. Its ears twitched. A slow, blinking gaze swept the cabin. When it caught sight of Clara, it didn't flinch. It simply stared. Eyes wide, wild, rimmed in pale hazel. There was no trust in them, but not fear either. She whispered, "Hey there, little one." No sudden movements. She sat up slowly, bones aching from the hard floor. The cub shifted in the scarf, but didn't bolt. Just let out a low, crackling chirp. The sound was rasped and uncertain. It reminded her of the last time her brother had tried to speak through the oxygen mask. Barely a sound, but still wanting connection. Clara reached out one hand, stopped, waited. The cub blinked once, then pressed its nose against the edge of the scarf again. She took that as permission. Her fingers found the side of its neck, brushing gently through the coarse fur. Beneath it, she felt the shallow drum of a heartbeat. Not frantic, not fading, just There, alive. She gave a shaky laugh. "You're stubborn, I'll give you that." The fireplace popped behind her. She rose slowly and stepped into the kitchenette, glancing back every few seconds. The cub didn't move. Clara pulled out a can of tuna. Not ideal, but it was what she had. She mashed it with warm water and slid the shallow bowl close, but not too close, to the blanket. She sat back, watching. For a long moment, the cub didn't budge. Then its nose twitched, a soft shuffle, and finally, cautiously, it emerged. Wobbly legs, tail dragging slightly, it approached the bowl like a wary soldier nearing a trap. Then it ate, greedily at first, then slower, savoring each bite. Clara smiled. A quiet, reverent thing. "That's it. You've got fight in you." Afterward, it stumbled back toward the scarf, didn't curl inside it, just collapsed beside it, head resting on the cloth like it meant something. Clara walked to the window. Outside, the forest was brighter today. Light spilled through the trees in beams. Tracks from last night's storm were already disappearing. Nature didn't keep memories the way people did. She returned to the floor, settling nearby. The cub's eyes fluttered open, then closed again. Its breath slowed, its sides rose and fell like bellows, steady now. That's when she saw it, a faint smear along the back right leg, dried blood. She leaned closer. The cub twitched, but didn't move away. She touched gently, separating the fur. A small cut, not deep, probably from the fall or from crawling through brush. Still, it needed tending. She cleaned it with water warmed on the stove, whispering nonsense the whole time. "You're lucky I'm not squeamish," she said.
"Or that I passed my wildlife medicine elective." The cub hissed once, then immediately buried its head beneath its paw, like it regretted wasting the energy. She laughed. "You're dramatic. I like that." The day passed in small rituals. She sketched while it slept, talked while it blinked at her from its perch by the hearth. She opened the window just a crack to let the room breathe and watched the cub sniff the new air, eyes sharp with instincts too old for its small frame.
She gave it a name. "Ash," she said aloud, "like the trees outside, like what's left after fire." Ash didn't respond, but when she whispered it again, he flicked an ear. That night, Clara left the fire burning longer than usual. She placed the scarf in the corner near her sleeping mat. Ash curled into it immediately, tail twitching once before stilling. She lay down nearby, not touching, just close, listening. Wind rattled the shutters again, but it no longer sounded empty.
Somewhere in the woods beyond, another sound answered. Faint, low, like a rumble beneath the earth. Clara didn't hear it clearly, not yet, but Ash did. His eyes opened, his ears perked, and for the first time, he didn't seem so small.
The next morning, Clara found Ash in the corner by the fireplace, pawing clumsily at a dust mote caught in the light. He was stronger today. That much was clear. His limbs, still oversized and unsure, moved with more purpose. And his eyes, they were different too, still wild, still watchful, but not distant. Now they lingered when they met hers. She made coffee in silence, the cabin steeped in early light. Ash watched her movements, nose twitching every time she opened a jar or struck a match. He didn't flinch anymore, not when she stood, not when she moved past him. Only when the wind moaned outside or the logs snapped in the fire. Clara took her mug to the chair by the window. Ash followed, not close, but near enough to lay between the sun-streaked rug and the warmth of her presence. He stretched out fully for the first time, long legs, paws extended. The fur on his belly was paler, speckled with darker rosettes. She sketched him while he dozed, loose lines, quick strokes. The outline of his small frame, the tilt of his ears, the odd nobility in his pose, even in sleep. And something else too. He had curled into the very spot her brother used to lie when they were kids, reading by the fire on stormy days. The coincidence pressed heavy against her chest. She didn't write that part down. That afternoon, she tried placing a bowl of shredded chicken near him again. This time, he didn't hesitate. He walked to her, close enough that the tips of his whiskers brushed her wrist as he passed, and began to eat. "All right then," she murmured, more to herself. "We're doing this." They developed a rhythm over the next 2 days. She'd wake to find him waiting near the door, tail flicking, eyes bright with curiosity. He began to follow her around the cabin like a silent shadow, watching her stir soup, fetch water, stack wood. At night, he curled closer. Not against her, but near. Within reach.
Should he want it? On the 4th morning, Clara left the door cracked open. Snow lay in soft, sparkling heaps beyond the porch. Ash sat in the threshold for a long time, nose to the wind. Then, slowly, he stepped out into the clearing. Clara stayed behind, watching from the doorway. He moved with cautious grace, pressing his paws deep into the snow, lifting each foot as if unsure it would hold. His head tilted toward the woods. He sniffed the air. And then he turned back.
Ran straight toward her. A clumsy, bounding dash that ended with him slipping on the threshold and landing half in the cabin, half on her boot. He scrambled up quickly, tail fluffed, pride bruised. She laughed aloud for the first time in days. "Show off," she whispered. Inside, the air smelled of pine resin and wood smoke. Ash leapt onto the windowsill that evening, curling into a tight ball, chin resting on his back foot, his tail wrapped around his nose. Clara took her brother's scarf from the peg by the door. She ran her fingers along the frayed ends, then laid it gently on the floor beside Ash. He uncurled, sniffed once, and dragged it to his usual spot by the fire, wrapping himself around it like a cub, reclaiming something lost. That night, she dreamed of paw prints in snow, a trail vanishing into trees, the soft thud of heartbeats that didn't belong to her own. By the 5th day, Ash had begun to play. Not like a house cat, but something rawer, older. He stalked a knot in the wooden floor with unwavering focus, leaping at it as if it might run. He pounced on a curl of birch bark from the kindling pile and wrestled it into submission with all 4 paws. Once, she caught him watching his reflection in the kettle's steel surface, head tilted, ears low. Then he batted it sharply, sending it spinning with a crash. Clara startled, but didn't scold. She understood what it meant to be caught off guard by your own reflection. They had routines now. She talked to him like he might answer. He never did. But sometimes, when she stopped mid-sentence, unsure of what she was even saying, he would blink slowly, once, and she'd feel less alone. It was late on the 6th evening when the wind changed. A sudden hush fell over the forest, the kind that came before snow, but not just snow. The kind that felt heavy in the bones. Ash was pacing near the window, ears upright, tail stiff. Clara noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way he turned his head toward the tree line, then back at her. Over and over. "What is it?" she asked softly, rising. Then she heard it. A rustle, distant but distinct. Not the wind, not branches, something else. Deliberate. Ash froze. Clara moved to the window. There was nothing, just snow and trees and the press of dusk. But Ash was already backing away. Not toward her, toward the hearth. He sat down, gaze locked outside. His tail lashed once, Then he reached forward and pulled the scarf across his paws. Clara didn't speak. She knelt beside him, her hand resting lightly on the floor. The silence between them said everything else. Because even in the warmth of firelight, they both knew. The forest wasn't done with them yet. By morning, Ash was gone. Clara woke to an emptiness she couldn't explain at first. The fire had gone out. The air in the cabin had a different weight to it, thinner, colder. She sat up slowly, brushing sleep from her eyes. His spot by the hearth was empty. She called softly. Ash. Silence. The scarf lay undisturbed, folded in on itself like a blanket never touched. She checked every corner of the cabin, under the bed, behind the firewood stack, even the bathroom, absurd as it was.
Nothing. Then she saw it, the door, still closed, but the bottom corner, a tiny sliver of snow, tracked in beneath the seam. Her breath caught. She hadn't left it open, she was sure. She stepped outside barefoot, snow biting instantly into her skin. Ash's tracks were fresh, shallow and scattered, heading toward the edge of the clearing. She didn't think, just grabbed her coat and boots, the scarf clutched in her fist. He hadn't wandered, that much was clear.
The prince moved with purpose, down the ridge, past the frozen creek. She followed, heart pounding against her ribs in a rhythm she hadn't felt since she stood in her brother's hospital room, waiting for a monitor to beep. The trail led farther than she expected, a mile, maybe more. Her legs burned, the wind picked up, clouds bruised the sky, thick with pending snow. Still she followed. Then she saw them, not just Ash's prints anymore, larger ones, heavier. She crouched instinctively, heart in her throat. The snow told the story clearly, Ash's small pads leading forward, then the sudden appearance of larger tracks beside them, at first parallel, then overlapping. Bobcat, an adult. Her stomach dropped. She crept forward slowly, eyes darting between tree trunks. The forest was silent, still, but not safe. Then she reached the place where the trail ended. Blood, a smear of red against white. Not a lot, but enough. She stood frozen, the scarf clutched to her chest. Breath coming too fast. A feathered clump of pale fur nearby. Ashes, unmistakably. No bodies, no shapes, just tracks that veered sharply into the thicker brush, then vanished. She called his name once, hoarse and shaking. Nothing answered. Not even the wind. The walk back to the cabin was slow, unreal. Her legs moved, but her mind stayed behind, kneeling in that patch of blood and crushed snow. Back inside, the cabin felt wrong, smaller, too quiet. She stared at the scarf in her hands, suddenly unsure whether to fold it or throw it into the fire. She didn't do either. She lay it gently on the floor and sank beside it. Hours passed. The light shifted, shadows lengthened. No knock, no paw steps, no second chance. That night, she left the door open, just a crack, enough. And when the cold crept in across the floorboards, she didn't close it, not right away. The next morning brought snowfall, heavy, soft. It erased the tracks, the blood, the story. Nature had a way of taking things back without permission. Clara stared out the window for a long time. She told herself Ash had found his mother, that the smear of red wasn't what it looked like, that the call in the night, the way he'd dragged the scarf toward the door, wasn't goodbye. But she'd learned long ago that love didn't always end with clarity. Sometimes it just ended. She wrapped herself in the scarf, feeling the stiffness in the wool from where it had soaked up melted snow. The scent still lingered faintly, smoke, pine, and something wilder. She sat beside the cold hearth. The fire hadn't been lit in over a day, and she couldn't bring herself to relight it. Not yet. In the silence, she reached for her sketchbook. On the last page, she drew the scarf first, then the hearth, then the empty windowsill, and finally, Ash. Not as he was when she found him, but how he had looked the morning before he left, alive, alert, his ears perked toward something she couldn't hear. She closed the book softly. Outside, the snow fell like feathers, and for the first time in weeks, Clara wept without holding anything back. Not for her brother, not just for Ash, but for the silence left behind by everything we try to save and lose anyway. The storm arrived that night. It came quietly at first, just a steady hush of snow dusting the cabin roof, the soft patter like distant breathing. But by midnight, it had grown teeth. Winds howled down from the ridge, dragging frost across the windows like claws. The trees groaned and bent beneath the weight of white. Inside, Clara sat on the floor beside the fire, her legs folded, arms wrapped around her knees. The scarf was draped across her shoulders now, worn like a memory she couldn't take off. Ash was still gone. It had been 2 nights. The silence where he used to be had grown larger, wider. She felt it echo through her, settling behind her ribs. The wind picked up again. Something slammed against the porch. She flinched. The chair? Maybe a branch. Her heart was already racing before her thoughts caught up. Another thud, then a sound, barely a sound at all, a scrape, like claws on wood. She stood slowly, every nerve alight. The fire crackled behind her, casting long, flickering shadows along the cabin walls. She opened the door. Snow swirled in immediately, blinding, biting at her skin. Then movement. A shape stumbled into the clearing, small, leaning, then collapsing. Clara rushed forward without thinking. Ash! He was barely visible in the flurry, covered in frost, legs trembling beneath him. His fur was matted, his tail dragging behind, like it no longer belonged to him, but it was him. Somehow. She dropped to her knees, scooping his fragile body into her arms. "You came back," she whispered, voice cracking in the wind. "Oh my God, you came back." She carried him inside, hands clumsy, heart raw. The fire, still burning low, cast its light on the curve of his back. His body was warmer than she expected. He'd been running. She could feel the strain in every muscle. He didn't make a sound, just collapsed into the scarf, curling around it with the urgency of something chased. She grabbed a towel and started drying the snow from his fur. He let her, didn't flinch, didn't move. Only when she touched a spot behind his shoulder did he twitch sharply. Pain. She parted the fur there. A fresh wound, shallow but long, a claw mark. Her breath caught. Had it been a fight? With his mother? With something else? She wrapped him tighter. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're safe. You're home." He rested his head against her arm, then eyes half closed. Breath shallow but steady. It was enough. Hours passed like that. She didn't sleep. She just stayed with him until he lifted his head and looked toward the door. A low growl rumbled in his throat. Not fear, not anger, something more alert. She followed his gaze, and then she heard it. A low sound, deep and vibrating, not close, not far, a call. Ash rose unsteadily, legs shaking, and took 3 steps toward the door before stopping. He turned back to her. Then the sound again, closer now. Clara stood slowly. Her fingers hovered above the latch. Outside, the wind had died. Snow still fell, but slower, thicker, the kind that softened everything it touched. She opened the door. And there, at the edge of the clearing, just beyond the porch light, stood the shape. Broad shoulders, tufted ears, eyes that glowed gold in the dark. The mother. She was bigger than Clara imagined. Not massive, but unmistakable. A creature shaped by survival, by seasons, by the quiet cruelty of the wild. Her breath puffed in and out in slow clouds, Her body was tense, but not hostile. She took a step forward. Ash responded with a chirp. One Clara hadn't heard before, softer, higher, a kitten's voice. The mother answered, not with sound, but with movement. She lowered her head slightly. A subtle gesture, but not submission. Recognition. Clara felt her fingers tighten on the doorframe. Ash looked at her, just once. Then he walked past her, slow, steady. He stepped onto the porch, then down into the snow, barely leaving a mark. He walked to his mother, stopped a few feet away, and waited. The adult bobcat stepped forward, nosed him lightly along the cheek, then turned to Clara and did something she would never forget. She stepped closer, stopped at the edge of the porch, and dropped something from her mouth, a bundle of cloth, the scarf. Clara stared at it. It was hers, but not as she had left it. It had been carried, dragged, smelled of pine and smoke and wild. The bobcat looked at her once more, long, unblinking. Then she turned. Ash hesitated only a second, just long enough for Clara to feel her chest ache. Then he followed her into the dark. Clara stepped into the snow, her breath catching in her throat. The two shapes moved as one now, mother and cub, disappearing into the tree line. No sound but the snow beneath their feet. She stood there long after they were gone, then looked down. The scarf lay in the snow, damp, tattered, but whole. She knelt and picked it up, held it close, and wept. Not the shattered kind of weeping she had done in hospitals. This was different. This time it was release. It was gratitude. It was the sound of something finally leaving that had lived inside her too long. A silence broken and filled. The days that followed passed quietly. The storm moved on, leaving behind a glassy crust over the snow. The trees held their weight with a stillness that no longer felt heavy. It felt patient, like waiting without urgency. Clara didn't see Ash again. She didn't expect to. The forest had reclaimed him, along with whatever thread had pulled him into her life. Whatever needed crossing between their worlds had been crossed and left intact. She spent one more week in the cabin. She didn't hike. She didn't journal. Mostly, she just sat by the window, listening to the creak of branches, the hush of snow slipping from limbs. The scarf sat folded on the table now, tattered but clean. She washed it gently with warm water and pine soap, not to erase what it had held, but to honor it. One morning, as light filtered through the pines, Clara found herself sketching again. Not the bobcat this time, not even the scarf, but a tree. The same one she'd noticed on her first day, crooked at the base, but tall. It leaned just slightly east, branches twisted but strong. Something in its stubbornness felt familiar. She drew slowly, letting the pencil find its own way. Outside, fresh tracks scattered the edge of the clearing. Fox, deer, something heavier. But no paw prints like his. She was okay with that. She realized she hadn't cried in days. Not because the grief was gone, but because it had changed shape. Become something quieter, less sharp. She felt it still, of course, in the pauses between thoughts, in the way her hand sometimes reached for another mug, in the echo of a laugh she no longer heard. But now, when she felt it, she didn't flinch. She breathed through it. Let it be. The morning she packed, the air was still, not frozen, but holding its breath. She wrapped the scarf carefully, not around her neck, but folded it into the top of her bag. It no longer felt like armor or burden. It felt like a story. As she stood on the porch for the last time, she looked back at the trees. Sunlight flickered between them like signals. Somewhere, deep in that labyrinth of wild, Ash was out there. Maybe with his mother, maybe on his own now, maybe watching her. She raised a hand in the air just in case, then turned and left. Weeks later, in her apartment back in Albany, Clara found herself drawn to the old cedar sketchbook. She opened it to the last page. The drawing of Ash, half-grown, watching the door. She added one last thing. Not a paw print, not the scarf, just a feather, resting on the floor near his tail. She didn't know why, it just felt right. She closed the book, set it gently beside the window, and whispered, "Thank you." The snow began to melt in March. Out there in the forest, beneath a stand of white pines, a scarf lay half buried beside a fallen log. Wind tugged at its edges, lifting it like a breath. A set of prints, larger now, more confident, circled near it. And in the distance, the cry of a bobcat echoed once through the trees. Not lost, not alone, just passing through. If this story touched your heart, stay close. Here on Paw Prints and Stories, we believe some bonds never end.